this church shall cleanse the what?
All right. Um, so where do I begin with this? I was thinking about when we were in Bible study, and I was thinking because every now and then, we would hit on. We're studying the book of Acts, and we'll hit on, certain things about the early church, about the first church, and then I would notice that at times when we're having conversation, it will bleed into the church, of course, of today, and some of the things that we hear on today's pulpit, and then having studied some of church history, it's always interesting how you find that there are patterns, right?
Mm-hmm.
There are certain things we believe, or things that we hear now from people, and
Yeah.
some people might think of it
They're new
think it's
ideas.
yeah, they're new, they're original ideas,
Yeah.
but they're ideas that have been around
Yep.
for a while. It's
Other
almost
people
as
have
if,
thought about them
yeah,
before.
exactly.
Yeah.
It's like we stumbled into what people have stumbled into even thousands of years ago. And I thought um, this would be a good opportunity for us to sort of talk about some of the heresies that have been around, even since the inception of the church. Um, Even during the time of Paul, when we think of heresies, I know when we think of heresies, we think about maybe the first century, that gets
Yeah.
closer to the end
End
of
of
the
the first
first
century and the
century,
beginning
entering
of
into
the in
second
second
century
century. Yeah.
and down. We think maybe because by then heresy was something that was becoming much prevalent.
Yeah.
But they have been around. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
even during the time of Paul the Apostle, those who believe that Christ had already come,
Yeah.
those who believe, the more of the
That the
Jewish
resurrection
sects.
wasn't really even true because Paul
It's true.
addresses that in 1 Corinthians 15. How is it that some of you are saying that there is no resurrection of the dead?
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. There were already heresies finding their way into the church.
Exactly. So and I think it's good for us as a church to remind ourselves, the history, the chain of these heresies, you know, where how they came into being, what their significance or what their impact was in the life of the church, and how they were dealt with. Because I think for us, we might hear some things that aren't in tandem with the word of God, and we might feel, okay, what do we do about that?
Mm-hmm.
How do we correct that? And also, it gives us a glimpse into those who really took on the role of being, I don't want to say gatekeepers, but those who were like the bishops of the church at
Yeah.
the time.
They took their duty
Their
very
duty very
serious to ensure
seriously.
that that the orthodoxy
Exactly.
remained
Was
intact, was
preserved.
preserved.
And
Yeah.
I don't think we appreciate that
Mm-mm.
enough.
Something on the point you said, one thing that just in studying part of church history, one thing that definitely kind that like impresses upon me deeply is like you were kind of is how sophisticated and how um very 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 you know um precise and in depth a lot of the reasoning
Yeah.
and like theology was.
Yeah.
Like these people that we'll talk about as we kind of begin to in this series as we kind of begin to dive into this further.
Yeah.
These people were really a lot of the they were thinking about these things in much more depth, really building the theology
Yeah.
from I know a lot of them were classically trained,
Of course.
in the classical
Like arts,
teachings, yeah, philosophies of
and
Greece and things like
yeah.
that, and it aided them. These were
Mhm.
great thinkers.
Yeah.
That's the thing, like the level of thought that they put into their arguments
Yeah.
is really impressive.
Yeah.
And as you said, because some of us might think, oh, yeah, these are new ideas that we are contending with, but not really. These are ideas that have been
They've
now
been
for a couple
around for
millennia and
quite
some
some time.
time. Yeah, and I think it's very helpful to be familiar with how those who, as you said, took
Yeah.
their duty as the
Took it seriously.
yeah, to safeguard.
Safeguard, exactly.
You
And
know,
I think that that's also one of the things that I don't see, ministers of God or shepherds or pastors. They, as I don't believe they see it as part of their duties, in the sense that to shepherd and to keep the orthodoxy, right? Because I mean, orthodox means to keep something straight.
Yeah,
right. That's
I
what
think
it
it's good to let we should
Yeah.
as we're doing this, we should define some of these terms so that
These
people
terms.
know. Yeah, you know what we mean by orthodoxy is literally means the correct teaching, the correct way.
Yeah.
Right, and the early church wasn't referred to as Christianity even, right? They
Exactly.
referred to as the way. You see that in the book of Acts, right? Those who practiced the way, those who followed the way,
Yeah.
right? It was referred to as the way. So what are the correct teachings of the way
Yep.
that keep you in the right path of the way? Right, so that's kind of what we mean as when we refer to the orthodoxy of the faith.
Because we are definitely going to be talking about a lot of things that require that have labels. They have
Terminology and
they have to define it.
Yep.
And also, I don't want to also give the impression that we can realistically
Cover every no way and every every like
detail.
variant no
But
way
the
no way.
information exists. They're
Yeah,
online,
yep,
they've been
people can-
cataloged, they've been recorded.
Yep. And it's free,
exactly.
so people can
That's the
always
beauty of it.
dive into it in as much
Yep.
depth as they'd like.
As they like. So I was thinking where to begin. And I thought maybe I'll start with the character Celsus. Now we don't know much, of course, and we'll find that as a pattern that we don't know much about a lot of people.
Yeah.
But there are also a good number that we do know at least enough because of the works that they wrote or what they recorded. Celsus is a character that comes in, I think, in the 2nd century, more of his works, right? And he is not a Christian, but he's I think he put out the first work that challenges
Christianity, yeah.
right. I think the name of his work was Truthful Word,
Mhm.
the True Word.
Yeah.
Right. The True Word. And the reason I want to start with him, even though it's not going down, he wasn't a Christian, so we can't deem him heretical, which is we haven't even gone to defining what heresy is
yeah.
yet, and we'll define what that is and why I don't really define Celsus as a heretic because he's not
a Christian, yeah.
right.
Yeah.
That's again we have to take it.
He was a critic of
consideration.
Christianity.
He was a critic of
Yeah, the
Christianity.
critic of Christianity.
So, but he was hearing about the faith as the faith was taking was
Roots
moving.
and spreading.
Yeah, and his critique of Christianity first, he critiqued Mary, right? How could she be?
Yeah, a virgin. Yeah,
how could she
a virgin give birth.
to
Yep.
Jesus,
Right.
the Son of God, as it were, because she was of low birth. She wasn't anyone of significance. So again, we have to keep in mind that the mindset of people in those days are not the same mindset that we have, right? Classes, classes was a real thing to people.
Yeah.
Right? They really believed that royal blood was a thing.
Was a thing,
right?
yeah.
Like,
Sure.
Their blood was special.
Mm-hmm.
So he dismisses Mary, right? As being the mother of God, as it were, right? Because she was of low birth and she was of no significance. And also, he does not regard Christ as really being who he said he was. That all the miracles that were recorded in the Gospels or recorded according to the oral tradition of the church, they were all tricks, right?
Yeah.
Even to the point, I think some believe that Jesus might have had a twin brother.
Mm-hmm.
And so when he was killed, it was his twin brother.
Substitute in his place, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. All of these ways to explain, the miracles and the supernatural aspects of Jesus. But why do I start with Celsus? Because even though not much of his works survive, right? The true word, which he wrote, or the true logos that he wrote, we know about him because of origin.
Yeah.
Right?
Contra Celsus.
Contra Celsus.
Against
Celsum,
against Celsus. Yeah.
Celsus,
We're kind of refuting
Celsus.
the refutation of Celsus's
Exactly.
arguments. Yeah.
And so again, to refute a lot of the things that Celsus says or claims, he quotes it in his work that this is what I'm refuting.
Yep.
And because of that,
We actually end up
able to-
getting the whole, pretty much the whole
which
work.
I see as a pattern. It happens a lot. Yeah. Like we might not know about the person, maybe the heretic, much
Yeah.
about him, or even his works might have been lost.
Yeah.
But we will
Because of the people
because
who,
of people
again, who
refuted
take the
it
work seriously to do the work of
Exactly.
refutation. Yeah.
That's the point I'm trying.
Yeah.
That's the
Like,
point I'm trying to
Irenaeus says
hammer in
that
this
is
episode.
before that, when he writes against heresies.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right. So, Origen, he stands to refute a lot of what Celsus says, and begins this area of apologetics in the church. Right. Origen is considered one of the apologetics
Yeah.
we have. In
I
the
mean,
church.
it's believed that like outside of, Christ, Paul, Origen is probably
Oh yeah.
one, like maybe number 3
No,
in as far as like influence, in Christian theology, which it ends up, again, we're kind of right now talking on a very high level, which, because it's interesting, because a lot of the of Origen's ideas would later on become denounced as heresies themselves.
Yeah.
So it's very interesting. But I kind of want to pull us back a little bit, because I feel like, before we even get to like Celsus, because again, we'll dive into some of these things, in later episodes in more depth. I feel like we should in defining orthodoxy, we should make it clear. Well, what do we mean as, like, what do we consider Christian orthodoxy? Because when I speak about Christian orthodoxy, what I say is this: it's what did the apostles, right, the direct apostles, the disciples, apostles of Christ believed, and what did they pass down to the apostolic fathers?
I was actually gonna get there.
You know what I mean?
I wanted to lay it. I want to set it up, and then we'll pick up exactly where you left, where you began that. The reason I start with Celsus is because Celsus represents the external side, right? It's not the church. Celsus represents the outer world, right? And their criticism
of Christianity, of the faith,
the Christian faith, or as the way, as you have put it, at least what they called it, the faith,
the way.
back then, right? And so we realized that the area of apologetics had to be developed to counter external criticisms of the church, right? Which even now we still do. We do apologetics, right? We can still name a couple, right? That are doing that work. But then we realized also as well that there were internal issues, internal. I guess what we're going to get to as a topic, topic, which is heresies, right? We realized that, but within our body, we don't all match.
Agree.
We don't all agree.
On some very important elements of the faith.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Which now brings us to a place.
Yep. And it's interesting because we all agree on the big thing, that obviously, like, hey, salvation through Christ, like everybody, but it's like, well, then it starts to get a little,
Which again, that's exactly where you landed. That's why I wanted to set it up there. Is that then when we realize amongst ourselves that we are not
all on the same page.
Yeah.
Where did we begin? That's exactly where I'm trying to get to. It's like, because I think that's where I think even a lot of the trouble starts, is because, some people say, well, this, church father said this too. This person said this. And because up until, the canon is kind of codified, and even after when the canon is codified, even, in the churches, in different aspects of the world, different parts of the world, there was still disagreements about certain books. And, certain books were read in certain places, certain beliefs were more established in certain places versus others, right? And so, like, for me, when I like to think about, okay, well, how do we define orthodoxy? What is it that we can say, that most people, because you can never always get 100%, but what most people agree on.
And
these are the fundamentals. And for me, it's always, okay, well, what did the apostles believe? And what did they pass down, right, to their direct, to their direct disciples that, that we often refer to as the apostolic fathers? What did they believe? Because, like we talked about, right, Irenaeus is kind of the first to write, contra heresies, right, against heresies. Yeah, where he's kind of the he really takes, and he's a descendant of John. He was a disciple of John. I said descendant, a disciple.
Irenaeus.
Yes.
Or,
So it was Polycarp.
Polycarp.
Polycarp,
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah, I
right.
think that's actually very good.
Yeah.
Because I think we also, maybe I get in there. We
Yeah.
have to make a distinction between the apostolic fathers
Yeah,
and the church
the
fathers,
church fathers, yes.
right? The
yeah.
apostolic fathers
Are like the direct,
exactly,
yeah, the direct disciples, the next generation
Yep.
after the apostles end.
apostles,
Correct.
exactly.
After the time of the
They have
apostles
a
end.
direct link
A
to the
direct link.
apostles.
Yep. At the
Actually, we can name some of them.
Yeah.
Because I think they are important.
Yep.
So
Ignatius of Antioch.
Is
Yes.
one.
Yep.
I think he was a student. Ignatius was a student of John, if I believe.
I'm gonna mess all
Okay.
of these up, but yeah,
Again,
probably
again,
yeah.
I think for those listening, please feel free to check and
Yeah.
A lot of these things. There are things
I'm
we
going
have
off of
read,
memory. Yeah, I
but
read
we're going
read in
off
the
of
past.
memory.
Yeah. I'll have to
Exactly.
relook
But
some
we
of
can
these up.
check. Ignatius of Antioch is one. We have
Papias, Polycarp,
You
yes.
mentioned Polycarp.
Yep.
He's of Smyrna, right?
Papias, I think it was a Smyrna.
Is it Papias that's of Smyrna?
I might have to. I
Okay.
might be wrong.
So
Yes.
let's just do their names.
Let's do their names and then, yeah.
Butcher where they come
We'll
from. So
we'll
it's
circle.
Ignatius.
Yeah, for sure. Ignatius was Antioch.
Ignatius
Yeah.
of Antioch.
Yep.
Polycarp.
Yes.
Papias.
Yep. And Irenaeus of Lyon.
Is Irenaeus of Lyon.
Yeah.
Him, I'm not sure. Is he a church father and apostolic father? Let's look that one up.
Okay.
Because I believe Irenaeus comes in the 2nd century, right?
Yeah, he was born in the 2nd century.
He was born.
Yes.
So, okay.
Yes.
So he was born in the 2nd century. I'm not sure if he's a apostolic father. or a
Well,
church father.
yeah, I would. Okay, yeah, he was a disciple of Polycarp.
Of Polycarp.
I think I
Okay.
include him because of that
Because
relationship. That line
Okay.
is
So-
preserved.
Okay.
But technically, because the church fathers, we would say maybe is a little kind of further down still.
Yeah.
That's
where it gets.
That's where it gets tricky. But yeah, but if you wanted to say who are the direct disciples of the apostles,
Exactly.
Ignatius of Antioch, there's
Ignatius.
Clement of Rome as well. Clement of Rome
Yes.
as well.
He was disciple of Peter
And Paul, yes, was disciple of
Yes,
Peter and Paul,
Clement of
right?
Rome.
There, Polycarp of
Polycarp,
Smyrna,
Smyrna.
yes,
Papias.
and Papias. Where was
Yeah.
Papias from?
That I don't know.
Let me try to
Papias,
remember.
And then there's Quadratus.
Yeah,
Quadratus, is he Athens?
Papias of Hierapolis.
Hierapolis.
Yes, Hierapolis. Yeah, it was the bishop
Yeah,
of
it's
Hierapolis. Yes,
Okay.
yes.
And again,
Um,
all of these places, I know they are ancient. They are the ancient
Names, yeah, of
Rome is still, of course.
of course.
Rome.
Yep, the eternal
That's
city.
Clement of Rome is
Yep.
still. It was the bishop of Rome. Ignatius of
Antioch.
Athens.
Antioch.
Sorry.
That's in Syria.
Antioch is in
In Syria, still remains Antioch till today.
today.
Yes.
What's the other one? Papias, you said of
Yes,
Hierapolis.
of Hierapolis.
That
Yeah.
sounds like a Greek city.
Yep.
That one, I'm not entirely sure where that is today. Polycarp of Smyrna. Smyrna is in Turkey. That one I know because Smyrna is now called Izmir. That's the third largest city in Turkey.
Yeah, Smyrna.
So we
Yeah.
have Istanbul, which is the largest one.
Ankara,
We
right?
have Ankara,
Yeah,
the second,
and then
Izmir
yeah.
is the third one.
Smyrna.
So Izmir is Smyrna today.
Yep.
Quadratus of Athens, I believe, right? And if that's right,
Yeah, Hierapolis is today known as, I'm gonna butcher this, Pamukkale in Greece. Yeah,
Okay,
yeah,
that
yeah.
sounds like a Greek city.
Yeah.
And then Quadratus from where? Is he Athens?
I'm not even
Okay.
sure.
If he's Athens, then we all know where Athens is at.
Yep.
So those are the church,
The apostolic fathers.
the apostolic fathers. They are the ones again that have a direct link to the apostles. They studied at the feet
Yeah.
of the apostles. That's why they are regarded as the apostolic fathers. Everybody else that comes after them,
Yeah.
are referred to as the church fathers.
Yeah.
Or the
Which
patristics.
yeah, exactly, the patristic, exactly. Which is like a couple centuries of people. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. And that's why, I think it's important to say, okay, well, we stop it at before, because a lot of the church fathers had very wildly different views
Yep.
on certain things. So it's like, okay, you can't really, but I feel like those who learned directly at the feet of the apostles, in addition to the apostles themselves,
Yeah.
is a good cutoff point for how we define orthodoxy.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Which I think that this is where it really takes off.
Yeah.
Is that now that we've identified the apostolic fathers who studied at the feet of the apostles.
Yeah.
We can imagine, at least for the most part, doctrinally, things are still
Yes, Quadratus of
unified,
Athens. Yes, I just
right?
looked that up. Yeah.
Quadratus of Athens.
Yeah,
Okay.
yep.
So we at least can agree that at this point in the in the church history,
Yeah.
things are still very much in accordance.
Yeah.
Right? They're still unified.
Yep.
Because I mean, when we read scripture, the letters of Peter does not antagonize the letters of Paul.
Mm-hmm.
Does not antagonize the letter of the letter of James or the letter of John. They're all still in the same thing. They're speaking. They're speaking with the same voice in the same way. I mean, just as their master had taught them, which is Jesus Christ, of course. But now we get to the apostolic fathers who study at their feet, and for the most part, from what we know, they still retain
the teachings of the way,
of the way of the apostles
Mhm.
as they taught it.
Yep.
Right. Things have not yet
begun to kind of splinter into
scatter.
different
Again, we did say in the beginning that yes, heresies were happening around the church.
Yes.
But we see that the apostles, even in their time, were
we're correcting those
dealing with
things.
these issues.
Yep.
Paul would write letters. They would
Exactly,
write
to
letters
correct
deal with
certain
it.
things, false
Right.
theologies.
And so now when we get to, I guess getting to the end of, maybe the apostolic fathers when they
Mhm.
started to get older,
Mhm.
right? Polycarp, I think he got to the age of 80, if I remember. I think Polycarp, he was martyred.
Yeah.
A lot of these apostolic fathers, were martyred. But as their teachings began to spread, other teachings started taking root.
Yep.
And they began this, I believe from them began sort of the tradition of refutation of
Heresies.
heresies.
Yeah.
Which are the doctrines that stray away from the orthodoxy. And then, which leads us to, what do we define then? What is the good definition of what heresy is, what we deem heretical? I know we've talked about, deviation from the orthodoxy, what it is that was passed down.
Exactly.
I think, again, let's go back, because I think we need to really iron out what you had said earlier. What is the orthodoxy?
Yeah.
What is it that we agreed
upon? Yeah.
Right.
What did the apostles believe?
What did they believe?
Exactly. What did they teach?
What did they teach, and what is it they were, they were guarding against? Right.
Yeah.
This thing that they were guarding against. I think Irenaeus would be the first to coin the term Catholic.
Yeah.
Right?
Catholicos. Yeah.
Right? Which
kind of
again means
one body. Yeah.
Right. Which is what he's trying to preserve.
Mhm.
Right? That the church must remain
one.
Right.
Yeah.
So, what is the oneness that the church is preserving? This orthodoxy. What is it exactly? If we could explain what that is, where would you begin?
For me, I mean, I would begin with the birth, life, death, and the resurrection of Christ.
Jesus.
Right? It's what did the apostles teach about the birth of Christ? Well, the first thing, right, is the Immaculate Conception, that he was born of a virgin.
Yeah.
Right? So, okay, like this,
We agree.
we agree. Yeah, exactly. We agree. We affirm all of it. Everybody,
Yeah.
we all affirm this, right? That he was born of a virgin.
Yeah.
Because some of the heresies talk about, nope, that
Yeah.
he's not born of a virgin.
Yep.
He kind of, we talk about the demiurge later,
I
some
can't
things
wait.
like
It's
that.
gonna be
Yeah,
interesting.
it's gonna be interesting,
But
right?
let's first
But
flesh
yeah,
out
but let's flesh out.
exactly
Yeah,
what the
we
orthodoxy
start at the
is, what we
birth,
believe.
right? The
Yeah.
birth of Christ. Who is he?
Yeah.
Right? He was born of the Virgin, right? Conceived by the Holy Spirit,
Yes.
born of the Virgin, right? And he lived, right? And he was crucified,
Mhm.
right? He was dead
Yep.
because again there are heresies concerning the way Christ died,
Yes.
right? But we believe he was crucified under Pontius Pilate, et cetera, and that he resurrected. We believe in the resurrection of the dead.
Of the dead.
Right? Again, because there's heresies about the resurrection,
Yeah.
right? And he will return again. The kingdom of Christ. What exactly is the kingdom of Christ?
Yeah.
All right. The kind of bigger one, I would say that kind of towers over all those is the relationship between Christ as Son
Yeah.
and the Father, because a lot of heresies
Yeah.
actually deal with that. Is a lot of the heresies are about that, about trying to really
Who is
explain,
Jesus?
who
do
we
men say that
I am, right? Matthew, exactly. It comes back to that.
Yeah.
A lot of the heresies are different interpretations and ways by which people explain with the relationship, like who is this Jesus, and how is Jesus related to God the Father? Because another thing that we all agree on, right, is that there is the God the Father,
Yeah.
right? That's part of the orthodoxy.
Yeah.
There's God the Father. But well, how exactly is that persona?
Yeah.
If you want, like Origin would use the word economies, right? The three different economies.
Yeah.
Then we'd end up getting to a point where we talk about hypostases, right? Ousia,
Yeah.
right? Which we get the word
Homoousios.
homoousios,
So,
yeah.
which is-
One essence, or is it all these things,
Yeah,
all these, the begotten,
yeah.
exactly, the incarnate,
Yeah,
all these
and
terms,
terminology
exactly,
yeah.
that really, you think, oh, okay, well,
We just say it so casually.
so casually nowadays, exactly. But they fought over these things. Yeah.
Yeah.
You just can't throw the word incarnate around like the way we
Exactly.
kind of throw it around nowadays. Oh, the
Yeah.
incarnate Christ. It had it had different meanings and really some nuances. Exactly. Like, and so that for me is the one that towers over, is the nature of Christ and how he relates to the Father. Right, because of course one the one of the more famous ones is the Old Testament God is completely different from the New Testament God. Then the idea of the demiurge, which is kind of borrowed from aeons and stuff, which again we'll dive into all of that. And we'll make sure we kind of some of these readings I've done in the past. Some of them I'm actually more familiar, and I've been going through a really great podcast that's reminding me of some of all these things, even adding more to my knowledge. So we'll make sure that we kind of try to cover these in a more chronological and kind of systematic way to help the listeners. But yeah, I feel like the orthodoxy, to kind of get back on track, the orthodoxy that, hey, it's like everybody, we're all Christians, right? This is what all Christians agree on, is born of the Virgin, right? Conceived of the Holy Spirit, right? So obviously born divinely, divine origin of Christ, that Christ is of divine origin, and that he indeed died, right? He indeed died, and he indeed resurrected, and indeed ascended and will return, right? Already, even like we talked about, even by the time when Paul writes his first letter to the Corinthians, there was already heresies about resurrection. Oh, that Christ did not really resurrect, and Paul has to really go, really, like, if you don't understand what you're saying, if there is no resurrection, if Christ is not resurrected, you're still in your sins, etc., 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 right? And I always say to people, you really need to read 1 Corinthians 15 if you really want to understand the faith, the claims of the Christian faith, because it hinges on the resurrection. But so when we talk about the orthodoxy, it's what did the apostles believe about the origins of Christ? Who do men say that I am? Right? What did the apostles believe, and what did they teach about the origins of Christ? What did they teach about his return? Right? About the kingdom, his kingdom. What did they teach about his life? Because a lot of that's important too, because the Gnostics try to fill in a lot of the early life of Christ, and it's like, wait, where do you guys get all this knowledge from? Again, secret gnosis, right? Secret knowledge. So it's important that what did they teach about his life, right? Because we can't. There's a lot of stories flying about of his childhood and things like that, and obviously his death, his return, and what did they teach about his relationship to the Father?
If these things are sounding sort of familiar to those who are listening, the life of Jesus, his death, his resurrection, his ascension, and coming back. If it sounds familiar at least in the way we put it, it's probably because maybe you know what the creed.
The creed, because that's one of the aims of and we'll talk about the creed. I
think you and I are sort of systematically like.
That's what I said. Yeah, I think as we go through, we're gonna do it. In the coming episode, we'll do a better job of like taking it, so that the narrative is coherent. To this is more of just kind of like we're kind of jumping around because it's more of like an overview of all of the kind of scope of things we're going to talk about.
So it's an overview. And so it should even impress on the mind of those who are listening you start to see why it was very important that these orthodoxies
Yep.
or these features of the orthodoxy or these aspects of the
Are
orthodoxy
properly
are
preserved. Yeah.
It's why you really appreciate. By the time you really think about what was going on, which we're going to spread out over a span of time with these episodes and this series, I believe that the Christian would have a very good appreciation for the ecumenical council of
Yeah.
Nicaea.
Yeah.
But when we get there,
Yeah.
you realize that that
Yeah.
this council
Was needed.
needed.
Yeah,
Like,
because there was a lot of by
yeah.
then there were so many different beliefs and different groups already, even that were that called themselves Christian, but were some of them were considered outside the church. They were too far. Yeah, they were outside the orthodoxy by that point. And the thing is that a lot of them even suffered through the persecutions.
Yeah.
Right, because they were, and that's the interesting part about the heresies. It's like some of them are today you say, well, I mean, they're still Christian. You know what I mean?
Right.
They may not, but like they still believe in the core things.
Yeah.
They still believe, and the other one I'll add is the salvific. Right, that's a word that you'll see.
Soteriology.
Exactly. Yeah, the salvific nature of what Christ accomplished.
Yeah.
Right,
that's
another component of the orthodoxy.
Yeah, exactly.
And many of them are all on board with this. And it's like, well, in that case, maybe it's, and it's many of these, what we would say, or like, heretical sects were, during the time of the persecutions looked like there was no distinctions being made, like, oh, okay, well, you're an innovation, or, you don't have to worry about, all of them were going through it, because they were still really fell under the umbrella of Christian. Right, despite sometimes very stark differences in belief.
Yeah, and we still have those types today.
Yeah,
I think you had said that. So I think it's in many ways we are not too far removed from that aspect. But I'm glad that you mentioned that feature of also the salvific aspect, because that is one of those things that will deviate as time goes on. Salvation of works and faith and the grace of Christ, and there are some that some of this heretical beliefs or doctrines that it's what you are doing, right? It's your work, and where exactly does that fit? So I think it's also going to be good for us. We're going to be referencing scripture as well.
Yeah,
just
of
to,
course.
Just
to anchor
to exactly why these things were seen as heretical and also dangerous to the faith, and also to see that the Bible does answer, a lot of these doctrines. But then, let me reel it back in, because the nature of these heresies, right? When I was thinking about it, when you really, when you zoom out and you look at these heresies from a distance, one of the components many of them seem to have is that they're trying to answer aspects of the faith
that are mysteries.
Yeah, exactly. They're mystical aspects of heresy. There's a mystical component that I think even that mystical part of it makes it so alluring to people, because when you're able to present an answer to, like, oh, okay, so that's what
that means.
Oh, he must have learned this. It's like, oh, that, and it's like catnip to us. It's like, it's like, oh, okay, we love
that stuff. Yeah. And that's the appeal, right? That, like, secret knowledge, the gnosis, like, oh man, so we figured it out. We know this extra stuff that wasn't that, and only a certain group of people kind of know. It's not really out there like that. But we know it. Exactly.
So
but
as a feature of heresy, that's a very, very powerful feature of heretical doctrines. The other part is also the philosophical, which is people trying to reason out things, perhaps maybe where they believe the oral tradition was not sufficient, or they believe they could help it along.
Help it along,
help strengthen it. And that's where we get into the areas of Platonic
Philosophy,
to,
yeah.
to help.
Yep,
I
some
guess,
ground,
their
yeah,
mindset,
exactly.
to ground the faith.
I mean, a good number of church fathers were Platonists.
Platonists,
Yeah,
sure.
and sometimes when you read some of, you're like, hey, this makes a lot of sense.
It's appeal to it.
Yeah, like this makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
But of course, there's things too that you're like, well,
It's
yeah,
going too far.
it's go, yeah,
Which and I think, man, now that I think about it, there's a lot of grounds to cover.
yeah,
And which is good for us, because in a way it'll help us to maybe revisit the things that we had studied a while back.
yeah,
And also to re-strengthen even our understanding a lot of a lot of these things. When you look at the framework that some of these, and I know we're still throwing out some words, but these series, we are going to be treating each heresy.
yeah, one by one.
This is just
We're not going to put them together.
It's
Yeah,
not be clumped up as it is right now. It's just for us to sort of set the stage, right? But by the time we get to like the Gnostic beliefs, and people like Valentinus.
Valentinus, yeah.
Basilides and things like that, and even like some of the offshoots when we get to like Marcion.
Mm-hmm.
We start to see that they're really trying to develop sort of like a framework, which of what you had mentioned earlier, the Father's role, the Son,
humanity. Well,
they break these concepts, these Platonic concepts, into actual, their actual.
Yeah, they're trying to put the pieces together and really, kind of give us a framework of how to understand, like, the whole, the whole
the world
works,
the
exactly, order of things, yeah.
Right, where my idea might be at the top.
Yep, the idea, yeah.
Truth,
yep.
And then Sophia, which is wisdom.
Wisdom, yeah.
It's like they're drawing all of these disciplines, but from a philosophical aspect with mystical components to sort of paint, in our minds, like in the believer's mind, that this is how things work.
Yeah.
Right, and I think part of what heresy is that we are not okay with the mystery.
Being a mystery, exactly.
Yeah, we are not okay with what's not revealed.
Absolutely.
So we're trying to fish and try to see if we can decode
exactly.
mystery.
Yeah, I think it's good that we're talking about, because we've kind of spent some time talking about the orthodoxy. I think now we're talking about the heresy, and that's and the what is the motive and the intent? What always kind of leads to heresy? And I think you nailed it exactly right. Is because the person who is the person to whom, I guess, that initiates the heresy, and the people who end up subscribing to it, it's because the appeal is because, ooh, I've got this new knowledge, this secret knowledge, right? That I'm able to fill in the blanks. It's the thing that appeals to us is knowing the unknown, that which was previously unknown, but now we now have it. We know it, and we want to go ahead and share with everybody, and it's like everybody comes to me.
Asks, we see that pattern still today.
Oh yeah, exactly.
Right?
People, that appeal, right? That's what leads to all kinds of things. The orthodoxy is no longer. It gets boring, right? The orthodoxy is no longer as appealing. It's routine, But now it's like, ooh, but it now we know this extra thing, or we I opened up the and I'll be honest, I'm guilty of this in the sense that, like, I'm a big, I'm not like a conspiracy theorist, but like there's things that I like, which is like mystery solve. So like for example, what's the writings of Thoth. Right, in Egypt, that talk about, like, the alchemy, and how pyramids were built, and alien races came in. I love that kind of, like, oh man, so where do I go? Tell me all more about it. So that kind of stuff, and that's why in Egypt, right? A good mystery, and that's why a lot of mystery cults, like as they used to be called, developed in that part of the world, and especially and the that's where the Alexandrians, like Origin, got really schooled in having to defend against a lot of these mystery cults, right? Origin was in Alexandria. Alexander, the bishop, the Coptic bishop of Alexandria, and his protege Athanasius. Right, the Coptics, the Alexandrians, the Egyptian church, however you want to refer to them, got really good at being able to really, because a lot of mystery cults, a lot of ideas kind of came from there. So they got really good at debating and really talking these things out. But yeah, I think, kind of getting back on course, heresies appeal to us because it's after a while the orthodox becomes routine. We're looking for something new. It's kind of like the lesson that was read today. The people say, we would seek a sign of you, and just as there's no other sign coming, but the sign of Jonah. That's it. That's all. There's no more signs, right? Paul writes about this, right? He says, for the Jews seek a sign, right? And the Greeks seek, is it knowledge or something like that? Corinthians, yeah, right. The Jews seek a sign, and the Greeks want, new revealed knowledge, right? Additional gnosis, additional knowledge, right? But we preach Christ. Yeah, wisdom, exactly. But we preach Christ, right? That's it. To the Jews, a stumbling block, right? It's foolishness. It's foolishness, right? Because it's not like this isn't wisdom. This isn't wise. The Greeks prioritize, as their culture, the ethos, right, was all about gaining wisdom, philosophy, right? Yeah, exactly. They like to listen to new things, right? Even Paul talks about that when he goes to to Mars Hill. So they love to hear new things, and that's what new ideas, and that's the thing that appeals to us. Like, ooh, there's a new, there's a new thing that we didn't know, but it's been revealed. I know in this group, and if I can belong to this exclusive group of people that have it, then the others they're less enlightened. We are more enlightened, and as humans, that's something that appeals to us.
Well put. Well put. Yeah. So I think as an overview, I think this is a good place to, I think we're approaching a place where we're really setting that foundation to build upon. Maybe the last component I think we can have in this overview is maybe to reemphasize, having talked about the nature of heresy and its appeal to us, and also what heresy means, a deviation again from the orthodoxy. Maybe to once more talk about, the way in which, or the passion in which, the bishops or those who were the strong proponents of this faith, why, how they dealt with it with fervor. What is it they were afraid of? If they just decided to sit back and allow people to bring in these
ideas, what did
they
they feel
envision?
as the consequences of it?
Exactly.
Because some people do say, like, orthodoxy is that which is only that which survived. Right? They're like, oh, what's really orthodoxy? It's only that which survived, right? And so exactly, and so it's like, what were they afraid of? What? And so we'll definitely talk about what like are the consequences of if this ends up becoming, or ended up become, had it become the kind of prevailing belief or doctrine. Like what would have been some of the how would it have altered the faith in certain ways, because I mean some of the church fathers that are aware, even still regarded widely, like Eusebius of Caesarea. They were, now we label them heretics, but they were very well respected, in their time. And so it's like, we should understand why did, and I think a part of answering that is we should also, why did they believe what they believed? Because I mean, these guys, they weren't just coming up with things out of thin air, right? They had, and they could refer to scripture as to why they believed what they believed.
Which is, I think, that's a very good point, because the these episodes we're going to be talking about, I think we really have to look at it seriously. It's not
just like, oh, these guys are bad.
Exactly.
This group of Christians are wrong. No, it's actually like,
the heretic. People say, oh, heretic. But you have to really, it's a serious thing. These people really believe.
They really believed it. And they had
biblical,
scriptures, to support it. Right? Some were anchored in scripture. Some, like you said, were then filling it in using Platonic ideas.
Exactly. So I think, and it will help us also to map, in our own time, what are we watching out for? Because I think in covering some of these heresies, we'll also see that they sort of survive.
Over and over.
Even though maybe not maybe lacking the potency of its inception, or when it was prevalent at times, but they survived in one
Form or the other, yeah.
right.
Yeah.
By the time we get to Montanism, right, which is more of like it seems like there's a charismatic nature
To
it,
yeah.
and we see that some of the essence of
Some of
that
the
is
Montan,
still
yeah.
around
Montanism
today.
sounds like, this one, I mean, there's, yeah, it sounds, yeah.
familiar,
Yeah, it's very
right?
familiar, yeah.
I mean, maybe to Celestial Church of Christ.
Exactly.
That's still very,
That's still very, very adjacent to, yeah, very adjacent to Montanism.
There are certain things that about it that
yes.
there are some, and
yes.
that's actually a very good point. Is that it made me think about something, because for us in our community, in the African churches, right? Even as we are all celestial members, there are things we believe we are not.
We diverge in certain things.
There's a pool of different things that we believe.
Yep.
But we're still celestial members. We're still Christians.
Yep.
But the thing about us is that I think because we don't have a culture, I don't know what it is. Maybe let me not be forward. But it seems with what we are studying in the early church, the moment they saw divergent doctrine coming in, they began to classify these things.
Yeah.
Like for us, there's no
classification.
We don't classify.
Yep. And typically,
we're
Celestians. Exactly.
But with them, it's like, oh, okay, you belong
to Valentinus. They would usually name it like against Marcionites. Yeah. They would name it so okay who they belong to, where this came from. We just kind of
catalog that.
Exactly.
It's like we all just carry all of it together. It's like a whole soup.
Yeah, of all kinds of meats in there.
That's a good thing.
Yeah, I know.
Or something that's not good.
Yeah.
I guess we'll find out.
I think we'll find out. Yeah, because a part of me is like, well, maybe naming something gives it that extra power. And maybe not. I agree with you. It's something I've thought about.
Yeah.
And I'm like,
just ignore it.
Maybe ignoring it and then it dies off. I absolutely agree. And that's something I've actually thought about. That is it in the naming of something that actually gives it that juice to keep persisting, or the approach that we kind of take nowadays of just like and as long as you don't name it, it doesn't really exist, right? Because there is the power of the name, you know. And so I know it's something that it's funny you bring that up, man, because it's something that I've quietly just kind of thought to myself. I'm like, it's going to be interesting how all these things shake out. It's going to be interesting how these things shake out. We see which one. And as I said, like, some people really do say that. Well, the definition of orthodoxy is that which survived, right? Is that which survived? It's not a view I take, because I'm like, nah, there's got to be like, what were the original teachings, right? But I'm say, well, really, it's what ultimately survived, right? And that's what and I think we're kind of like, well, let's see how all this stuff shakes out. And it'll be interesting. It'll be interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, I think, and to bring it all to an end, to a wrap here, in the end, it all leads back to Christ, because I think the idea is for Christ to have one bride, right? The church, as it were.
Yep.
We do acknowledge, the diversities that we have. And all of these things didn't happen overnight. Right? They happened in processes over centuries, right? But in the end, the idea is to preserve the orthodoxy, and to also see that even though we are going to be talking about heresies that have been cataloged, and we do have their historical backdrops, or their historical backgrounds. It's also for us now in the 21st century to keep in mind that does not mean it's an end to heresies, right? Heresies still persist today. They still continue even now within the church. How to identify them, if they are linked to the heresies of the past, or if they are even linked perhaps to the ideologies of the modern age, because we do have there is a modernization of even this faith that we have, which of course I think in every era, the faith sort of finds a way to succumb to the aspects of its time.
Of its time,
right?
absolutely.
We are no different.
Yeah.
Aspects of this
of our time,
succumb
to the times in which it's practiced.
Yeah, exactly. And for us to keep that in mind and to be aware of it, and those who God has placed in those high authorities, right? To also take into stock that part of your job is to safeguard that which was entrusted to us. We might think, oh well, Papa Oshofa had a revelation, but that does not mean we don't still belong to the
Mm-hmm.
history of the church.
Of the church,
It's still
yeah.
a church. It's the
Yep.
church of Christ.
Yep.
Whether the Lord appeared, Papa Shava might not have studied, under a
Apostolic father, yeah.
apostle,
Apostle,
or
yeah.
a bishop, or any of those
Yep.
that lineage.
Yep.
So,
But the message has to remain the
but the
same.
message is still exactly, and it needs to be preserved.
Yep.
And that's part of our jobs, to preserve that. At least we'll see why at the very least, to see why it's important to preserve the orthodoxy. So I think that's a good place for us to land the plane. I don't know if you have anything else you might want to add to this overview episode.
No, not at all. I think I'm looking forward to kind of diving into these. It's a good opportunity for me as well to kind of reacquaint myself with some of these, right? To kind of reread a lot of these things and, kind of explain, some of the, to kind of remind myself about some of these. And I really, I look forward to discussing them.
Yeah, same.
Yeah,
It's exciting.
yeah.
Exciting. All right. Well, next episode.
Yep. See you next time.